This is Alex Berger from Berger Law in Marquette, Michigan. I want to tell you about a training that I had last Thursday in East Lansing at the Michigan State Law School about the Intoxilyzer 9000. This training was put on primarily by terrific OWI attorney Mike Nichols out of East Lansing, but it was all day talking just about this device called the Intoxilyzer 9000. We heard from scientists, we heard from folks from the state crime lab, we heard from attorneys that really know this stuff in and out, and I just wanted to give some takeaways from this training. So first of all, the Intoxilyzer 9000 is a device that's been rolled out in Michigan for about 2 years, so it's a new device. The purpose of it is an evidentiary breath alcohol testing device, which means that it's a big thing that's back at the station, that's calibrated and checked and verified, and it can give a blood alcohol content through the breath testing that can be used in court. That's why it's evidentiary. The PBTs that you use on the side of the road, they are not evidentiary. They're not supposed to be used as substantive evidence of your impairment or blood alcohol content. So, Intoxilyzer 9000, the device itself has been around for a while. Michigan just recently took it up as their primary device. In the Upper Peninsula, there are 15 of these units, one in each of the counties. And a lot of officers are trained on how to do it. They have to do their recertification every 2 years. But by and large, at least folks in the UP are trying to use it as little as possible because they're unsure how to use it. It has a bunch of new error codes, lots of issues with it for law enforcement trying to use it. But we're getting more and more of them in terms of the OWI alcohol cases. We see more of these reports. So here's an example of what the actual report looks like that we get. And then we also get these diagrams which show airflow, and the black line is the blood alcohol actually that's going through. So I'll talk about these in a second. But the science behind the device is good. There are some assumptions that are problematic, like it assumes a particular ratio of blood alcohol to breath alcohol to make its numbers, but that's not an issue for the device. The device just is infrared spectrometry. It's very solid. It runs infrared through the breath, and the infrared light bounces off in a certain way of ethanol molecules, so it can determine relatively accurately what the what the alcohol content in the breath that's going through the device is. So science is good. The problem with the machine, this first thing that I learned, is that the machine's science may be great, but human bodies are not a pure gas producer. For example, it does 2 tests of your breath. You have to blow twice. In between there, it does a calibration check. So it sends through ethanol to make sure that it's sensing ethanol correctly. But it sends through a dry gas calibration check, meaning it just sends through dry gas ethanol to make sure that that infrared bounces off correctly. But when gas comes out of your lungs, it is not dry gas. It's full of water, it's full of mucus, it's full of particulates that pick up in your lungs. It's a different temperature than the dry gas check. All of those things are important. That's why, we see this test right here, and the numbers there, they're not exactly the same, even though those 2 tests were taken within minutes of each other. These are not that accurate just because of the differential amount of ethanol that can come out of your breath. So the first thing that I took away is that the testing device is great scientifically, but the sampling is so variable that it's really easy to point out some reasonable doubt issues with whether or not it's an accurate test. So there's a lot that I learned that can be used to help defend these cases when someone gets an Intoxilyzer 9000, the big breath test for an OWI case. Another interesting takeaway is this phrase that we heard a lot in the training, which is the longer you blow, the higher you go. And there is good science and indication that because the way that the device works and because of the way your lungs work, the longer you blow, the higher your blood alcohol content reading will be. And here's the reason. So here's one of those things. So the black line here, this one is the blood alcohol content. The lower, less dark line is your breath. So as you can see in the x-axis is the time. So as you can see, this one was the lower test. They didn't blow quite as long, And then this one was the longer test, and they blew longer. The longer test has a higher blood alcohol content. That curve is going up. And what that shows is that if you blow longer than you need to, you're going to get a higher reading than you should. And the reason for this is fascinating. So there are two reasons, basically. First of all, we generally breathe from the top of our lungs. And we're constantly clearing out those little sacs where we store our air and transfer out the oxygen and carbon dioxide. And so we clear out the ethanol pretty regularly of those. So what we're getting is a good reading if we're taking shallow breaths. If you were to sample a shallow breath, it would show exactly what is actually coming out of your lungs in real time. We don't typically breathe all the way down to our diaphragm, but when you blow in the breath test and you're doing that prolonged breath, you are getting all of the air out of your lungs. And so it's picking up ethanol that's just been sitting and building up in the lower parts of your lungs. So the breath content at the end of the blow is artificially high because it's sucking up that kind of like collected ethanol from the lower parts of your lungs. The second reason why it has a higher blood alcohol content the longer you blow is because temperature makes a big difference for the infrared spectrometry. In other words, the higher the temperature of the air sample or the breath sample, the more it's going to look like there's ethanol. That just has to do with the way that the molecules interact with the infrared radiation. But basically, when you're breathing from the bottom of your lungs, you're getting warmer air, and that is artificially increasing the blood alcohol content reading in the machine. So in other words, if you blow longer, you are making the result artificially high. Now, the device itself, it has a little star, I believe, that pops up when you've breathed enough, but you can keep going if you want to. I think it also makes a ding. But what you should do if you're ever in this device is blow as short as possible. So if you hear anything, if you see something pop up on the screen, stop blowing. And that can significantly lower by the tune of like 10%, 20% maybe. The numbers vary, but it can lower your result, and it's a more accurate result. The next thing that was pretty interesting is that one of the presenters actually did some like self-studies to try to figure out if there was ways to lower the results. And one of the ways that he found out was that if you breathe deeply and in quick succession a couple of times before you actually blow, that clears out the ethanol that's been building up and sitting there and gives a more accurate reading, a lower reading of your breath alcohol content and your blood alcohol content. So if I were at the police station having to give one of these tests, I would be taking deep breaths over and over again while I'm waiting. They have to do a 15-minute waiting period to make sure you don't have anything in your mouth before they can do the breath test, and taking those deep breaths is a great time. There's nothing illegal about it, nothing improper, and what you're really doing is trying to get a more accurate reading. So, great training. I'd be happy to talk with anyone more about the Intoxilyzer 9000. If you know anyone who has a case where they had to do the big breathalyzer back at the station, I'd be happy to talk with them. But the three interesting takeaways are: number one, it's a scientifically good device, but there's a lot of variability in how the breath comes out and what that affects the reading. Second, there's the longer you blow, the higher you go principle. So you want to blow as short as possible. That gives you a more accurate, lower reading. And then third, you want to take those breaths before you give the test, because that again clears out the ethanol, gives you a more accurate reading. Hope this was interesting. Hope it was helpful. Have a good day.